The chains burned into her wrists like frozen fire, and Zara Finch pressed her forehead against the rusted bars of the slaver's cart as dusk bled across the horizon in shades of violet and crimson. She wept silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks, because screaming had done nothing but earn her bruises, and the other captives had long since stopped making any sound at all. The cart rolled through what used to be the outskirts of Philadelphia, past abandoned strip malls and crumbling apartment complexes that nature had begun reclaiming with aggressive vines and wild grass. 3 weeks ago she'd been a graduate student finishing her thesis on medieval history. Now she was merchandise, being transported to some underground auction where vampires and their human collaborators traded in flesh. The world had changed 6 months ago when the veil fell. That's what the news had called it before all organized media collapsed. The supernatural beings that had hidden in shadow for millennia suddenly found themselves exposed, their glamours and protections stripped away by some cosmic event no one fully understood. Vampires, werewolves, fae, and worse had been revealed to humanity all at once. The resulting chaos had been catastrophic. Governments fractured, cities burned, and in the power vacuum the strong preyed upon the weak with impunity. Zara's hands trembled as she gripped the bars. She'd been taken from the university library's basement where she'd been hiding with a dozen other survivors, scrounging for canned food from the vending machines. The slavers had been human, which somehow made it worse. They'd sold out their own species for vampire gold and the promise of protection. She'd fought, of course, left one of them with a broken nose and another with claw marks down his face. But there had been too many, and they'd had tranquilizer guns. The cart hit a pothole and lurched violently. Zara's shoulders slammed against the bars and she bit back a cry of pain. Around her the other 7 captives swayed with the motion, vacant-eyed and silent. Most were young, like her. One woman looked barely 18, her blonde hair matted with dirt, staring at nothing. An older man in the corner had given up entirely, his breathing shallow and labored. "Not much further now," called the driver. A heavy-set human with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He glanced back at them with casual indifference, the way someone might check on livestock. "Auction starts at full dark. You lot better look lively. Master Cassius don't pay premium prices for damaged goods." Zara's stomach churned. She'd heard whispers about the auctions. Vampires purchased humans for blood servants, manual labor, or worse. Some kept them as pets. Others drained them dry within weeks. A few, the truly ancient and powerful ones, collected humans the way people once collected rare wines, keeping them alive for decades as personal reserves. The cart rolled past a burned-out church. Its steeple collapsed inward like a broken spine. Zara remembered when this area had been vibrant, full of life. She'd driven this route dozens of times to visit her sister in the suburbs. Her sister, God. She hoped Maya had made it to one of the human strongholds up north. She hoped Maya thought she was dead rather than knowing the truth of what had become of her. Fresh tears spilled down Zara's cheeks, hot and bitter. She'd been so stupid to think the library was safe, so arrogant to believe she could outlast the chaos. She'd had a plan, had been gathering supplies for a journey north, but she'd waited too long, wanted to be too prepared, and now she would never see her family again. The sun sank lower, nearly touching the jagged skyline of the city proper. In the distance, Zara could see the old skyscrapers silhouetted against the dying light. Some still had lights in their windows. The vampires had claimed the tallest buildings, turning them into vertical courts where they ruled over whatever remained of civilization. She'd heard they'd restored power to their domains while the rest of humanity huddled in darkness. The driver pulled the cart onto what used to be Interstate 76, now a cracked and broken road lined with abandoned vehicles. They headed toward the city center, toward the vampire districts. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. Once they reached the auction house, it would be over. She'd be sold, collared, and her life would no longer be her own. She tested the chains again, knowing it was futile. The iron was solid, the locks secure. She'd already tried picking them with the loose wire she'd found in the cart bed, but her numb fingers couldn't manage the delicate work. And one of the slavers had noticed and confiscated her makeshift tool, laughing at her attempt. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular, to God or fate or whatever cosmic force might be listening. "Please, not like this." The cart shuddered to a sudden halt. Zara's head snapped up, her pulse spiking with instinctive alarm. The driver cursed, reaching for the rifle mounted beside his seat. The 2 guards riding alongside on motorcycles had stopped as well, their engines idling, weapons drawn. "What is it?" one guard called. "Roads blocked," the driver responded, his voice tight with tension. Zara pressed her face against the bars, trying to see. Ahead, a fallen tree lay across the highway, massive and ancient, too perfectly placed to be natural. Her breath caught, An ambush. But by whom? Raiders? Other slavers trying to steal their cargo? Or something worse? The dusk had deepened to twilight, that dangerous hour when vampires could move freely, but the darkness wasn't yet complete. Shadows pooled beneath the overturned cars littering the roadside. The air felt charged, electric with potential violence. "Back up," the driver ordered, throwing the cart into reverse. He never completed the maneuver. Something white and impossibly fast moved in Zara's peripheral vision, a blur of motion that defied human comprehension. One of the motorcycle guards simply disappeared, there one instant and gone the next, his bike clattering to the pavement. His scream cut off abruptly, wet and final. The second guard opened fire, his automatic weapon chattering in the stillness. Muzzle flashes strobed in the gathering darkness, illuminating nothing. The bullets hit empty air, and then the guard was airborne, thrown backward with such force that he crashed through the windshield of a rusted sedan 30 feet away. The driver fumbled with his rifle, hands shaking so badly he dropped it. No, no, no. A figure materialized in front of the cart, and Zara's breath stopped entirely. He was beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, in the way a blade was beautiful, deadly and perfect and utterly inhuman. White hair fell past his shoulders, pure as snow, framing a face of sharp aristocratic angles and bone-white skin that seemed to glow faintly in the twilight. His eyes were the color of fresh blood, bright and terrible and ancient beyond measure. He wore black that might have been modern, or might have been from another century entirely, perfectly tailored to his tall, lean frame. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, making the air itself seem to bend around his presence. A vampire, but not just any vampire. The way he held himself, the absolute confidence in every line of his posture, spoke of nobility, of centuries of command. "Slavers," he said, his voice like silk over steel, carrying easily despite being barely above a conversational volume. He spoke with an accent Zara couldn't quite place, something old European but refined by centuries into something unique. How remarkably disappointing. "I had hoped your kind had been eradicated from my territories." Lord Valdrin," the driver stammered, recognizing him. The terror in his voice was absolute. "We didn't know, we were just passing through. We meant no disrespect." "My territories," the vampire repeated, each word precise and cold. "Where human trafficking is forbidden under pain of final death." "Were you perhaps unclear on the meaning of forbidden, or simply foolish enough to believe I wouldn't notice?" "Please, my lord, mercy." Valdrin Hastings moved, and the driver's pleas ended in a choked gurgle. The vampire had crossed the distance between them faster than Zara's eyes could track, and now held the driver by the throat, lifting him effortlessly from his seat. The rifle clattered to the ground. "I am not a merciful creature," Valdrin said quietly. "I am ancient and patient and utterly intolerant of those who defile the few laws I have established. You were warned, your entire miserable profession was warned." He tightened his grip and Zara heard the wet crack of vertebrae separating. The driver went limp, and Valdrin discarded him like trash, letting the body fall to the pavement. He turned toward the cart, those blood-red eyes scanning the captives within, and Zara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. She should have been terrified. Every instinct screamed at her to cower, to look away, to make herself small and unnoticeable. But something in his face, some flicker of what might have been disgust or anger, directed not at them but at their circumstances, made her meet his eyes instead. Their gazes locked, and the world seemed to narrow to just that point of connection. His eyes widened fractionally, surprise flickering across his perfect features. Then he moved again, and the iron bars of the cart simply exploded outward in a shriek of tortured metal. Zara threw up her arms to shield her face from the flying debris, felt the chains around her wrists snap like paper. When she lowered her arms, Valdrin stood inside the cart, somehow managing to look regal despite the cramped space and the cowering humans around him. "You are free," he announced, his voice carrying absolute authority. "The slavers are dead. My people will arrive shortly to provide transportation to a safe zone. You will not be harmed." The other captives remained frozen, too traumatized or too shocked to process what was happening. But Zara felt something break loose in her chest, some desperate knot of tension that had been coiled there since her capture. She started to shake, relief and terror and exhaustion crashing over her all at once. "Easy," Valdrin said, and suddenly he was crouching before her, moving with liquid grace. Up close he was even more striking, his features so perfect they seemed almost unreal. He reached toward her wrists where the shackles had cut deep welts into her skin, his long fingers careful despite their obvious strength. "You're injured. How long have you worn these chains?" 3 days, Zara managed, her voice hoarse from disuse and crying. "Maybe 4, I lost track." His expression darkened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. 3 days, and in that time how many others did these slavers capture? "I don't know. We were their second pickup. They mentioned others before us, other carts going to other auctions. Where? The word was sharp, demanding. Zara tried to think through the fog of exhaustion. They mentioned names, Master Cassius, like the driver said, someone called Marguerite, and a compound in Old City near the waterfront. Valdrin's eyes blazed brighter, genuine fear flickering in their depths. Cassius. That parasite should have been destroyed decades ago. He stood abruptly, pulling a phone from his pocket, the incongruity of such modern technology in the hands of such an ancient being momentarily startling. He spoke rapidly in a language Zara didn't recognize, issuing what were clearly orders, before ending the call and returning his attention to the captives. "Can you walk?" he asked Zara directly. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and pushed herself to her feet. Her legs threatened to buckle after days of sitting in the cramped cart, but she forced them to hold. The young blonde woman whimpered, and Zara reached down to help her up, finding reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Good," Valdrin said, approval flickering in his expression. "The others need to move as well. We cannot linger here. There may be more slavers, and full darkness brings greater dangers than humans with guns." As if summoned by his words, headlights appeared in the distance, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Zara's heart leaped into her throat, but Valdrin remained perfectly calm. "Mine," he said simply. 3 black SUVs pulled up within moments, and vampires emerged from each one. They were all pale-skinned and white-haired like Valdrin, but none carried themselves with his particular authority. These were subordinates, soldiers perhaps, dressed in modern tactical gear that looked bizarre paired with their otherworldly appearance. "My lord," one said, bowing slightly. "Female, with hair cropped short and eyes like winter ice. Your orders? Transport these humans to Sanctuary 7. Food, medical care, clean clothing. They are to be treated as refugees under my direct protection. Any who wish to leave my territories may do so with safe passage and supplies. Any who wish to stay will be given housing and work. Make this clear to them." "Of course, my lord." "And the slavers?" "Dead. But there are more. I want every trafficking operation in the greater Philadelphia area shut down by dawn." Send word to the other houses. This is no longer a matter of casual enforcement. This is a purge. The female vampire's expression turned predatory, her lips pulling back to reveal fangs. "It will be done." Valdrin turned back to Zara and the others. "Go with them. You have my word you will not be harmed. I have matters to attend to, but I will check on your status once the immediate crisis is resolved." He started to turn away, to simply leave, and Zara felt a sudden desperate need to stop him, to understand, to have answers to the 1,000 questions rioting through her mind. "Wait," she called out, her voice stronger than she expected. Why save us? Vampires you don't just help humans." Valdrin paused, looking back at her with those ancient eyes. "Most don't," he agreed, "but I am not most vampires, and these are not ordinary times. The Veil's fall has created chaos, and in chaos, the worst instincts of all species emerge. I have ruled these territories for 200 years, and I will not allow them to descend into barbarism simply because the world has changed." "You're doing this for order? For control?" His expression shifted, something almost like amusement touching his features. "Partly, but also because slavery is an abomination, regardless of species. I learned that lesson long ago, and I do not forget my lessons." Before Zara could respond, he was gone, moving so fast he seemed to simply vanish into the darkness. She stood staring at the empty space where he'd been, her mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. "Come," the female vampire said, not unkindly. "You are safe now. Let us get you somewhere warm." Zara allowed herself to be guided toward one of the SUVs, supporting the young blonde woman who still hadn't spoken. As they drove away from the wreckage of the slaver's cart, away from the bodies of their captors, Zara looked back once. In the distance, she thought she saw a flash of white against the darkness, moving toward the city, toward justice and violence, and a reckoning she was glad she wouldn't witness. She touched her wrists where the shackles had been, feeling the tender welts, and tried to understand the vampire who had saved her. Sanctuary 7 turned out to be a converted hotel in what used to be University City, protected by high walls and armed guards, both human and vampire. The interior was clean, well-lit, and warm, so dramatically different from the squalor Zara had endured that she nearly wept again from sheer relief. They were taken to a medical bay where a human doctor, an older woman with kind eyes and steady hands, treated their various injuries. Zara's wrists were cleaned and bandaged, her dehydration addressed with IV fluids, her bruises catalogued and medicated. Through it all, she felt numb, disconnected, as if she were watching events happen to someone else. "You're going to be all right," the doctor said gently, patting Zara's shoulder. "The physical wounds will heal. The rest, well, that takes time, but you're alive and that's what matters." "The vampire," Zara said suddenly. Valdrin, who is he? The doctor's expression shifted to something like reverence. Lord Valdrin Hastings, Vampire King of the Eastern Territories. He was one of the first to reveal himself when the veil fell, and he established order here when everything else collapsed. He's complicated, dangerous certainly, ancient and powerful beyond measure, but also more honorable than most, vampire or human. He's saved a lot of lives these past months. Vampire King, Zara repeated softly. She'd been saved by royalty, by one of the most powerful beings in the New World Order. Get some rest, the doctor advised. You've been through hell. Let yourself heal. But rest proved elusive. Zara was given a private room, small but comfortable, with an actual bed and clean sheets and a bathroom with running water. She showered, washing away layers of grime and fear, and dressed in the simple clothes provided. Then she lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She should have felt safe, should have felt grateful, and she did, in a way. But she also felt unmoored, lost, as if her entire understanding of reality had shifted. Vampires were supposed to be monsters. The stories, the legends, the horror movies, they all agreed. Vampires were predators who viewed humans as nothing more than food or playthings. Yet Valdrin had saved her, had declared human trafficking an abomination, had spoken of honor and lessons learned. Who was he really? What kind of creature could be both monster and savior? The questions followed her into uneasy sleep, and her dreams were filled with blood-red eyes and white hair and a voice like silk over steel. She woke to knocking on her door. Groggy and disoriented, Zara called for whoever it was to enter. A young human woman came in, carrying a tray of food that made Zara's stomach growl despite her emotional turmoil. Breakfast, the woman said cheerfully. Well, lunch technically. You slept 14 hours. The doctor said to let you rest as long as 14 hours? Zara sat up, shocked. Your body needed it. I'm Rachel, by the way. I help run things here at Sanctuary 7. If you need anything, just let me know, Rachel, Zara repeated, trying to focus. Thank you. For the food, for everything. Don't thank me, thank Lord Valdrin. This is all his doing. Rachel set the tray on the small table by the window. There's a community meeting at 6 if you feel up to it. We do them twice a week, let everyone know what's happening, answer questions, that sort of thing. No pressure, though. After Rachel left, Zara ate mechanically, barely tasting the food despite its quality. Her mind kept returning to the Vampire King, to the moment their eyes had met, to the strange intensity of that connection. She told herself it was trauma, shock, gratitude warping her perceptions, nothing more. The afternoon passed slowly. Zara explored the sanctuary, finding it well organized and surprisingly peaceful. Humans moved freely, working in kitchens and gardens, caring for children, living something almost like normal lives. The vampires she saw maintained a respectful distance, clearly under strict orders regarding the humans under their protection. The community meeting was held in what used to be the hotel's conference room. Perhaps 50 humans gathered, ranging from teenagers to elderly, all refugees from the chaos beyond the walls. Zara took a seat near the back, observing. A vampire male stepped to the front, one of the soldiers from the previous night. He spoke clearly, updating everyone on supply statuses, security improvements, and opportunities for those who wished to work. Then he paused, his expression growing serious. Lord Valdrin asked me to inform you all that as of dawn this morning, every known slaving operation in Philadelphia has been eliminated. Those captured have been freed and are being processed through various sanctuaries. Those responsible have been executed. The trade in human flesh is now punishable by final death in all territories under the Eastern Court's control. A murmur ran through the crowd, relief and disbelief mixing together. Furthermore, the vampire continued, Lord Valdrin wishes to extend an invitation to any skilled humans who wish to join the rebuilding efforts. We need doctors, teachers, engineers, farmers. The pay is fair, the work is meaningful, and you would be helping create something stable and lasting from the ruins of the old world. After the meeting, Zara found herself lingering, wanting to ask questions but unsure how to formulate them. The vampire noticed her hesitation and approached. You have concerns? He asked, not unkindly. I'm trying to understand. Why is he doing this? Really doing this? The vampire considered her for a long moment. Because he believes in civilization. Because he's seen what happens when societies collapse and how difficult they are to rebuild. Because despite being a monster by your species' definition, he has principles he refuses to compromise. He paused. And perhaps because he's lonely, though he'd never admit it. 200 years of ruling, of maintaining order, of watching humans and vampires alike disappoint him, it takes a toll. Lonely. The word struck Zara as profoundly sad. This ancient powerful being somehow isolated by his own strength and standards. You're the one from last night, the vampire said suddenly. The one who looked at him without flinching. He mentioned you. Zara's heart skipped. He did? Briefly. Said you had courage. Coming from Lord Valdrin, that's high praise. The vampire's expression turned appraising. What did you do before the veil fell? I was a graduate student. Medieval history. Medieval history, the vampire repeated, something like amusement in his tone. How ironic. You studied our era without knowing we were real. I studied the human side, Zara said. The castles and courts and politics. The warfare and art and daily life. All of which we influenced more than your historians ever realized. He extended a hand. I am Soren, by the way, captain of Lord Valdrin's guard. Zara shook his hand, finding his grip cool but not unpleasant. Zara Finch, graduate student, former captive, current confused refugee. Soren laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. That's an honest self-assessment. If you want to be less confused, you should speak with Lord Valdrin directly. He appreciates intelligence and curiosity, and he did say he would check on the rescued. I could arrange a meeting if you wish. Every rational instinct told Zara to decline, to keep her distance from the Vampire King, to not invite danger into her life any more than it had already intruded. But the irrational part, the part that remembered blood-red eyes and the strange moment of connection, wanted answers. Yes, she heard herself say. I'd like that. Soren nodded approvingly. I'll send word. In the meantime, consider what you want to do going forward. Staying here is an option, but so is requesting transport north or west to other safe zones. Lord Valdrin's protection extends to wherever you choose. Over the next 3 days, Zara settled into the sanctuary's rhythms while awaiting word about the meeting. She helped in the kitchens, finding comfort in the simple task of preparing food for others. She checked on the young blonde woman from the cart, learning her name was Emma and that she was slowly coming out of her traumatized silence. She spoke with other refugees, hearing their stories of loss and survival, and felt her own experience becoming contextualized as part of a larger tragedy. She also spent time in the sanctuary's small library, reading everything she could find about the Veil's fall and the vampire courts that had emerged from the chaos. What she learned both fascinated and disturbed her. The Veil had apparently been some kind of magical barrier maintained by the supernatural creatures themselves, hiding them from human awareness through glamours and psychic influence. Its collapse had been sudden and total, the result of some magical cataclysm no one fully understood. Within hours, every vampire, werewolf, and fae on Earth had become visible to human perception for the first time in millennia. The resulting panic had been catastrophic. Governments had tried to respond with military force. But how did you fight creatures who could move faster than bullets, who could heal from almost any wound, who had lived long enough to understand human psychology better than humans understood themselves? Some cities had descended into warfare, others had burned. Still others, like Philadelphia, had been claimed by powerful vampires who imposed order through sheer force of will. Valdrin Hastings had been one of the first to reveal himself publicly, making a televised address from City Hall where he declared the Eastern Territories under his protection and established a set of laws that applied to vampire and human alike. No feeding without consent, no killing humans except in self-defense, no slavery, no torture. In exchange for following these laws, humans would be protected from the worst predators and provided with the resources to rebuild. Many vampires had opposed him, viewing humans as lesser beings unworthy of such consideration. Valdrin had destroyed the dissenters with brutal efficiency, making examples that ensured compliance. The reports Zara read described executions public enough to send a message but controlled enough to avoid descending into chaos. He was a tyrant, she realized. A benevolent one, perhaps, but a tyrant nonetheless, ruling through fear and power and the absolute conviction that his way was correct. It should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself intrigued by the contradictions, by this creature who could be savage and protective in the same breath. On the 4th evening, Soren found her in the library. Lord Valdrin will see you tomorrow night, he said. He's been occupied with matters of state, but he's made time in his schedule. I'll escort you to the court at dusk. Zara's pulse jumped. The court? I thought he might just come here. Lord Valdrin rarely leaves his seat of power for casual meetings. It's both a practical security measure and a political statement. But don't worry, you'll be perfectly safe. You're under his direct protection, and no one would dare harm you. That's not entirely reassuring, Zara muttered. Soren's lips quirked. Good. A healthy respect for danger will serve you well. Wear something nice if you have it. Court has its protocols even in these diminished times. After he left, Zara sat in the quiet library, her hands trembling slightly. She was going to meet the Vampire King in his own domain, in the seat of his power. It was foolish, probably dangerous despite Soren's assurances, and yet she couldn't deny the anticipation building in her chest. She wanted to see him again. Wanted to understand him. wanted to unravel the mystery of what he was and why his actions contradicted everything she'd thought she knew about vampires. The next day passed in a haze of nervous energy. Rachel helped her find appropriate clothing, producing a deep green dress that was simple but elegant, fitting well despite not being tailored for her. Zara showered and braided her dark hair, studying herself in the mirror and barely recognizing the woman looking back. She'd lost weight during her captivity, her cheekbones sharper, her eyes carrying shadows that hadn't been there a week ago. But she was clean and fed and healing, and that had to count for something. Soren arrived precisely at dusk, dressed in formal black that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Gothic painting. 2 other vampires accompanied him as escort, both equally pale and otherworldly. "Ready?" Soren asked. No, Zara thought, but she nodded anyway. The drive into the city center was surreal. The streets closer to the court were actually maintained, cleared of debris and functioning with something approaching order. Humans and vampires moved along the sidewalks, not quite comfortably together but at least not in open conflict. Lights blazed in buildings that had been dark for months, powered by generators or restored grid sections. The court itself was housed in what used to be the Comcast Technology Center, the tallest building in Philadelphia. Its glass and steel facade gleamed with internal lighting, a beacon visible for miles. Security checkpoints ringed the building, manned by heavily armed guards who checked identification and weapons with military precision. Soren's vehicle was waved through immediately and they descended into an underground garage before taking a private elevator that shot upward so fast Zara's ears popped. They emerged on the top floor, into a space that had been transformed into something between a corporate headquarters and a royal palace. The architecture was modern glass and steel, but the furnishings were ancient and exquisite. Tapestries that looked genuinely medieval hung on the walls. Furniture that belonged in museums occupied conversation areas. Art that should have been in galleries was displayed casually. The juxtaposition of old and new, of priceless history and contemporary design, was dizzying. Vampires moved through the space with purpose, dressed in everything from business suits to more traditional formal wear, conducting the business of their strange government. A few humans were present as well, clearly officials or advisors, treated with respect rather than disdain. "This way," Soren said, leading Zara down a corridor lined with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city below. They stopped before massive double doors carved with intricate designs. 2 vampire guards flanked the entrance, both wearing armor that managed to look functional and ceremonial simultaneously. Soren spoke quietly to them, and one opened the door gesturing for Zara to enter. "I'll wait here," Soren said. "Don't worry, just be yourself. He values honesty above all else." Zara stepped through the doors into what could only be described as a throne room, though adapted for modern sensibilities. The space was vast, with soaring ceilings and walls of windows showing the city sprawled below. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat a chair that was absolutely a throne despite its contemporary design, all sharp angles and dark materials that somehow conveyed authority and power. Valdrin Hastings sat in that throne, reviewing a tablet with the same attention other rulers might give to ancient scrolls. He looked up as Zara entered, those blood-red eyes finding her immediately across the distance. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Valdrin set aside the tablet and rose with liquid grace, descending from the platform. He wore black again, perfectly tailored, formal but not ostentatious. His white hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp lines of his face, the predatory beauty that marked him as utterly inhuman. "Zara Finch," he said, and hearing her name in his voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "I'm pleased to see you looking so much improved from our first meeting. The sanctuary has treated you well?" "Yes." Zara managed, her voice steadier than she expected. "Thank you for everything." He waved a hand dismissively. "You've already thanked me through your mere survival. That's sufficient." He gestured to a seating area near the windows, more comfortable than formal. "Please sit. I assume you have questions." "Most do, after experiencing what you've experienced." Zara settled into a chair that was probably worth more than her old apartment, watching as Valdrin took the seat across from her. Up close, in better lighting, he was even more striking, every detail of his appearance perfect and terrible. "I have so many questions I don't even know where to start," she admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Then let me start by answering the ones everyone asks. Yes, I am over 200 years old, turned during the Napoleonic Wars. Yes, I need blood to survive, though I can sustain myself on donated supplies and willing participants. Yes, sunlight would destroy me, as would fire and decapitation. No, I do not view humans as inherently inferior, merely different and considerably more fragile. Yes, I am dangerous. No, I will not harm you. Is that sufficient for the basics? Despite the gravity of the situation, Zara felt a surprised laugh escape. That's remarkably efficient. I've had this conversation many times since the veil fell. I've learned to streamline it. His expression grew more serious. But I suspect your questions go deeper than simple curiosity about vampire nature. You studied medieval history, you understand courts and politics and the exercise of power, so ask me what you really want to know. Zara took a breath, organizing her thoughts. Why establish laws protecting humans? Most vampires seem to view us as prey at best. You could rule through terror and take whatever you wanted. Instead, you've built something that almost resembles a functioning society. Why? Valdrin leaned back, his gaze distant, as if seeing into the past. Because I remember being human, he said quietly. I remember fear and vulnerability and the fundamental injustice of being subject to forces beyond my control. When I was turned, I swore I would never become the kind of monster who inflicted that helplessness on others. But you have, Zara pointed out. You've killed people. The reports I read about how you consolidated power were brutal. Yes, he agreed without hesitation. I've killed many people, and I'm sure I'll kill more before my existence ends. But there's a difference between killing in service of order and killing for pleasure or cruelty. I don't torture. I don't feed the sadistic impulses that many of my kind indulge. I establish rules and enforce them consistently, and if that enforcement sometimes requires violence, so be it. The alternative is chaos, and chaos inevitably hurts us the powerless most of all. So you're a tyrant for the greater good, Zara said. I'm a tyrant because someone has to be, Valdrin corrected. Democracy, that grand human experiment, requires certain prerequisites: education, communication, security, shared social contracts. The veil's fall destroyed all of that. What remains requires a strong central authority to rebuild those prerequisites. Perhaps in a century, if we succeed, there can be elections and representative government again. But right now, in this moment, what's needed is order imposed from above. And you decided you should be the one to impose it. I decided I was better suited than the alternatives. Have you heard of Cassius, the vampire who was purchasing slaves for his pleasure? Or Marguerite, who views humans as nothing more than walking blood bags? Or the countless others who would turn this city into a feeding ground if given the chance? His eyes blazed brighter. I am not a good creature, Zara Finch, but I am better than them, and that has to be enough. The honesty in his words struck her. He wasn't trying to justify himself or present himself as heroic. He was simply stating his assessment of reality as he saw it. The slaving operation, Zara said. You really eliminated all of them? All the ones we could find within the territories I control. Some may remain hidden, but we're hunting them. Slavery offends me on a fundamental level, and I will not permit it to exist where I have power to stop it. Because you remember being human and powerless. Yes, he studied her intently. You're handling this conversation remarkably well. Most humans in your position would be terrified, yet you're arguing political philosophy with me. Why? Zara considered the question. Because you saved my life and I need to understand who you are. Because nothing about you makes sense according to everything I thought I knew. Because... She paused, then decided on honesty. Because when you looked at me that first night, I felt like you saw me. Actually saw me not just as another human but as a person. And I want to know if that was real or if I imagined it. Something shifted in Valdrin's expression, a crack in the controlled facade. You didn't imagine it, he said softly. When our eyes met, I saw your courage and your fear and your refusal to be diminished by your circumstances. I saw someone who had every right to break but chose not to. That's rare, worth noticing. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something Zara couldn't quite name. She should have been afraid of this admission, of the intensity in his gaze, but instead she felt drawn forward, wanting to close the distance. What happens now? She asked. I'm grateful for the sanctuary, but I can't hide behind your walls forever. I need to figure out what comes next. What do you want to come next? Valdrin countered. I want to help, Zara said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I want to be part of rebuilding something good from all this destruction. I studied history. I understand how societies function and fail, and I don't want to just survive. I want to contribute. Valdrin's lips curved into a genuine smile, and it transformed his face, making him look almost human despite his otherworldly features. Then stay. Work with my human administrators. Use your knowledge to help us establish systems that function. I can't pay you what your degree would have earned in the old world, but I can offer purpose and protection and the satisfaction of meaningful work. You're offering me a job, Zara said, slightly stunned. I'm offering you a place in what we're building. The specific role can be determined based on your skills and interests. But yes, fundamentally, I'm offering you employment in my court. He leaned forward slightly. And if I'm being entirely honest, I'm also offering you the opportunity to stay near me, because I find you fascinating and would like to know you better. Is that too forward? Zara's heart hammered. A vampire, an ancient king, was expressing interest in her. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But it was also thrilling in a way she couldn't deny. You're attracted to me, she said, needing to hear him confirm it. I am drawn to your strength, Valdrin said carefully, to your intelligence and your courage and the way you look at the world. Whether that constitutes attraction in the way you mean, I'm uncertain. I've lived a very long time and genuine interest is rare. But yes, I would like to know you better, to understand you, to have you near. If that makes you uncomfortable, say so now, and I'll ensure our interactions remain purely professional. Zara tried to think rationally, to consider all the reasons why any kind of personal relationship with a vampire king was insane. The power imbalance alone was staggering. He was her savior, her employer potentially, and a creature who could kill her without effort. Every rational consideration screamed that she should establish strict boundaries. But rationality had never accounted for the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her, had never explained the strange sense of recognition she'd felt when their eyes first met, had never prepared her for the possibility that in the ruins of her old life, she might find something unexpected and profound. I don't want it to be purely professional, she heard herself say. I want to know you too, but I need you to understand that I'm still healing, still figuring out who I am in this new world. I can't promise anything beyond honesty and trying. That's all I would ask, Valdrin said. His hand moved toward hers, stopping just short of touching, giving her the choice. May I? Zara closed the distance, placing her hand in his. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip gentle despite the strength she knew it contained. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, and from the way Valdrin's eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. What is this? She whispered. I don't know, he admitted, but I would very much like to find out. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, while the city lights glittered beyond the windows and the impossible became possible. Eventually, Valdrin released her hand, though he seemed reluctant to do so. You should return to the sanctuary for tonight. Rest, consider my offer, and we can discuss specifics tomorrow. But Zara, whatever you decide about working here, about staying, I want you to know that my protection extends to you permanently. Even if you choose to leave to go north or west, you will be under my safeguard. No one will harm you while I exist. That's a significant promise, Zara said. I don't make promises lightly. He stood and she rose as well. Soren will escort you back. Sleep well, and think about what you want from your future. Zara nodded, suddenly exhausted despite the late hour. As she reached the door, she looked back. Valdrin had returned to his throne, but he was watching her, his expression unreadable but intent. Thank you, she said again, for saving me, for seeing me, for this chance. Thank you for surviving, he replied, and for having the courage to question me. I need that, more than you know. The drive back to the sanctuary felt dreamlike. Soren didn't press for details about the meeting, though his curiosity was evident. Zara stared out the window at the dark city, her mind whirling with everything that had happened. She was attracted to a vampire, not just any vampire, but one of the most powerful beings in the New World Order. It was insane, dangerous, complicated beyond measure, and yet she couldn't deny the connection she felt, the way something in her had responded to him on a level that transcended reason. Back in her room, Zara lay awake for hours, replaying every moment of their conversation. The way he'd spoken about remembering his humanity. The honesty with which he'd acknowledged his own violence while drawing clear moral lines. The unexpected vulnerability when he'd admitted to being drawn to her. By the time dawn light crept through her window, she'd made her decision. She would stay, would work in his court, would explore whatever this strange connection between them meant. It might be a mistake, might end in heartbreak or worse, but for the first time since the veil fell, she felt like she had a purpose beyond mere survival. She would help rebuild civilization. And she would get to know the vampire king who had shattered iron bars to set her free. 3 months later, Zara stood in what had become her office in the court building, reviewing proposals for a new education system. She'd thrown herself into the work with fierce dedication, discovering that her historical knowledge translated surprisingly well into practical policy. She understood how medieval administrative systems had functioned, how courts had managed resources, how laws had been enforced in eras before modern bureaucracy. That understanding helped her design systems that worked in the current chaotic environment. She'd also become something of a liaison between the human refugees and the vampire administration, translating needs and concerns in both directions. It was exhausting work, often frustrating, but deeply satisfying. She was making a difference, helping to build something that might actually last. And through it all, her relationship with Valdrin had developed in ways both expected and surprising. They saw each other most evenings, sometimes for formal meetings about policy but increasingly for simple conversation. He was brilliant and complex, carrying centuries of experience and knowledge but never condescending. He asked about her opinions, challenged her ideas, admitted when she changed his mind. He was also surprisingly funny in a dry, sardonic way, and sometimes heartbreakingly lonely despite being surrounded by people. The attraction between them had grown steadily, a slow burn rather than an explosion. They hadn't touched beyond occasional hand-holding, both cautious about rushing into something neither fully understood. But the tension was there, electric and undeniable, building with every shared glance and lingering conversation. Zara was reviewing a particularly complex resource allocation proposal when her office door opened. She looked up expecting one of her human colleagues, and found Valdrin instead. He rarely came to this part of the building during business hours, preferring to conduct official meetings in his formal chambers. "Is something wrong?" she asked immediately, noting the tension in his posture. "There's been a development," he said, his voice carefully neutral in a way that made her nervous. "Cassius has been found." Zara's breath caught. Cassius, the vampire slaver who had been purchasing humans before Valdrin's purge. They'd been hunting him for months, but he'd gone to ground hiding somewhere beyond the Eastern Territories. Where? The old subway tunnels beneath Old City. He's established a compound there, holding at least 24 humans captive. Valdrin's eyes blazed with controlled fury. "I'm leading the assault myself at Dusk. I wanted you to know in case something goes wrong." "You think it's a trap," Zara said, understanding immediately. "Possibly. Cassius has allies among the old vampire houses who oppose my reforms. This could be a lure to draw me into an ambush, but I can't ignore it if there's even a chance those humans are real and suffering." Zara stood crossing to him. "Then take every precaution. Extra guards, backup plans, everything. I am." He looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "But I needed to see you first. To tell you that if something happens to me, Soren has instructions to ensure your continued protection. You'll be safe regardless." "Don't talk like that," Zara said fiercely. "You're going to come back." "I intend to," Valdrin said. Then with sudden decision, he reached up and cupped her face with one cool hand. "But just in case, I need you to know that these past months with you have been extraordinary. You've reminded me why I chose to fight for something better rather than descending into monstrosity. You've made me want to be worthy of the faith you've placed in me." Valdrin, she started, but he was still speaking. "I believe I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I wasn't sure such an emotion was still possible for me, but you've proven otherwise. And I needed to say it at least once before facing potential death." Zara's world tilted. He loved her. This ancient, powerful, terrifying creature loved her. The knowledge flooded through her like warmth, like light, dissolving the last of her uncertainty. "Then you definitely have to come back," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Because I love you too, and we need time to figure out what that means." His expression transformed, wonder and joy and something almost like disbelief flickering across his features. Then he was kissing her, cool lips pressing against hers with surprising gentleness. Zara melted into the kiss, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, feeling the barely restrained strength in his frame. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless despite his lack of need for air, Valdrin rested his forehead against hers. "I will come back," he promised. "We will have time, I swear it." Then he was gone, moving with that impossible vampire speed, leaving Zara standing alone in her office with her heart pounding and tears threatening to fall. The hours until dusk were agonizing. Zara tried to work but couldn't focus. She paced her office, then the sanctuary, then returned to the court building to wait with the other humans who had come to care about the Vampire King and his mission. Rachel found her in the waiting area outside Valdrin's chambers. "He'll be fine," she said, squeezing Zara's hand. "Lord Valdrin has survived for over 2 centuries. He knows what he's doing." "I know," Zara said, "but that doesn't stop me from being terrified." The sun set. Darkness fell, and somewhere beneath the city, Valdrin was fighting for the lives of human slaves and possibly his own survival. Time crawled. Zara watched the clock obsessively, each minute an eternity. Other vampires came and went, conducting the business of the court, but none had news. The assault had been planned with utmost secrecy to prevent warnings reaching Cassius. It was after midnight when the commotion began. Zara heard it first as distant shouts, then running footsteps, then the organized chaos of multiple people moving with urgent purpose. She rushed to the corridor, her heart in her throat. Soren appeared, his clothes torn and stained with blood, both red and the darker blood of vampires. His expression was grim but not grief-stricken, and Zara seized onto that detail desperately. "He's alive," Soren said immediately. "Injured but healing. It was an ambush like he suspected. Cassius had 3 other vampires with him, old and powerful. We lost 2 of our own and several more are badly hurt. But we killed all the enemy vampires and freed 28 humans. I need to see him," Zara said. "He's in the medical wing. Go, he's been asking for you." Zara ran, not caring how it looked. Not caring about dignity or protocol, she burst into the medical wing to find organized chaos. Wounded vampires were being treated with blood transfusions and bandaging, though their supernatural healing meant the injuries were already closing. Human medical staff moved between patients with professional efficiency. Valdrin was in a private room, sitting on an examination table while a doctor worked on a deep wound across his ribs. His shirt was gone, revealing pale skin marred by healing cuts and bruises. But he was upright, conscious, and when he saw Zara, his face lit up with obvious relief. "I told you I'd return," he said. Zara burst into tears, surprising herself. She'd been holding it together through sheer force of will, and seeing him alive and healing shattered her control. She crossed to him, careful not to interfere with the doctor's work, and touched his face with shaking hands. "You're an idiot," she said through her tears, "walking into an obvious trap like that." "It worked out," Valdrin said, catching one of her hands and pressing it to his lips. "The humans are safe. Cassius and his allies are destroyed. The cost was high, but the outcome was just. You could have died. But I didn't." His thumb traced patterns on the back of her hand. "I had too much reason to survive." The doctor finished his work and discreetly withdrew, giving them privacy. Zara studied the healing wounds, seeing how the edges were already knitting together, the supernatural healing accelerated by the blood transfusion. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Less than you'd think. Vampire physiology has advantages." He tugged her closer until she stood between his knees. "I meant what I said earlier. I love you. Nearly dying hasn't changed that if you were worried." "I wasn't worried about that," Zara said. "I was worried about you not living long enough for us to figure out what we're doing." "What are we doing?" Valdrin asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "I have no idea," Zara admitted. "I'm a human, you're a vampire king. The entire situation is completely insane. But I know I love you, and I know I want to try to make this work, whatever this turns out to be." "I've never had a romantic relationship in my vampire existence," Valdrin said. "I've had dalliances, encounters, but nothing that lasted or meant anything. I'm not sure I'll be good at it. I've never dated a 200-year-old vampire who rules a post-apocalyptic territory," Zara countered. "So we're both new at this." He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "Fair point." His expression grew serious. "There will be challenges, political complications from vampires who disapprove of my attachment to a human, practical issues regarding our different lifespans and needs, social implications I can barely begin to predict." "Are you trying to talk me out of this?" Zara asked. "No. I'm making sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Being involved with me comes with significant complications." "Being alive in this world comes with significant complications," Zara said. "At least this way I get to face them with someone I love." She leaned forward, kissing him carefully, mindful of his injuries. "We'll figure it out, one problem at a time." Valdrin pulled her closer, the kiss deepening despite his injuries. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers in that gesture that was becoming familiar. "Stay tonight," he said softly. "Not for anything physical beyond presence, but I'd like to have you near while I finish healing." "Okay," Zara agreed. "Where do vampire kings sleep anyway?" "Private chambers 1 floor up, significantly more comfortable than the medical bay." He stood, moving with only slight stiffness, and offered her his hand. "Come. Let me show you the personal side of immortal rule." His chambers were exactly what Zara expected, a mix of ancient luxury and modern comfort. The bedroom was dominated by a massive 4-poster bed that looked genuinely medieval, with heavy curtains that could block out all light. Art covered the walls, pieces from dozens of different eras. Books lined shelves, thousands of them, ranging from ancient leather-bound volumes to contemporary paperbacks. "It's beautiful," Zara said, taking it all in. "It's accumulated clutter from centuries of existence," Valdrin said. "But yes, I'm fond of it." He found a shirt and pulled it on carefully. "You can take the bed. I'll rest in the chair." "Don't be ridiculous," Zara interrupted. "The bed is enormous. We can share it without anything inappropriate happening." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish." They settled into the bed together. Zara in the comfortable clothes she'd been wearing, Valdrin in loose sleep pants and the fresh shirt. The intimacy of it was startling but not unwelcome. Valdrin pulled her against his side, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "This is nice," Zara murmured, feeling suddenly exhausted. "Strange but nice." "Agreed," Valdrin said. Though I should mention I don't actually sleep in the traditional sense. I'll enter a rest state, but I remain somewhat aware. So if you need anything during the night, just speak. You're going to watch me sleep? Zara asked, oddly not bothered by the idea. Probably. You're fascinating. And I've been denied the pleasure of simply observing you at peace. Zara laughed sleepily. Creepy, but I'll allow it given the circumstances. She felt his chest move with silent laughter. Then his cool hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing, and she let herself drift toward sleep, feeling safer than she had in months. The next weeks were intense. Zara moved into chambers adjacent to Valdrin's, maintaining some independence while acknowledging their relationship. It caused ripples through the court, exactly as Valdrin had predicted. Some vampires approved, seeing it as their king embracing the new reality of human-vampire coexistence. Others disapproved vocally, viewing it as weakness or inappropriate attachment to what they still considered lesser beings. Valdrin dealt with the dissent with his characteristic combination of patience and absolute authority. He made it clear that his personal relationships were not subject to court approval, while also demonstrating that his attachment to Zara hadn't softened his leadership. If anything, he seemed more determined, more focused on building systems that would outlast individual rulers and create lasting stability. Zara found herself navigating complex political waters. She was neither queen nor official consort, but undeniably the Vampire King's favored companion. Humans looked to her as a representative and advocate. Vampires treated her with wary respect, uncertain how much influence she actually wielded. She tried to use her position wisely, continuing her work on education and refugee integration while avoiding the appearance of overstepping her authority. Their relationship deepened naturally. They spent hours talking about everything from philosophy to practical governance to their respective childhoods. Valdrin shared stories of his human life in Revolutionary-era France, the horror of his turning, the long centuries of learning to navigate immortality. Zara told him about her family, her studies, her dreams for what the future might hold. Physical intimacy developed slowly. They were both cautious, aware of the power dynamics and the need to ensure Zara's full autonomy. But the attraction was undeniable, and eventually caution gave way to passion. Valdrin was careful, almost reverent, hyper-aware of his strength and her fragility. The experience was intense and strange and wonderful, bridging the gap between human and vampire in ways both literal and metaphorical. "I love you," Valdrin said afterward, holding her with careful gentleness. "More than I thought I was still capable of loving anything." "I love you too," Zara replied, tracing patterns on his pale skin. "Even though you're a terrifying immortal monarch who could kill me with one hand." "Especially because of that?" he asked, amused. "No, despite that, I love you because you choose not to be a monster, even though you could be. Because you remember being human and let that memory guide you toward building something better." "You give me far too much credit," Valdrin said. "I give you exactly the credit you've earned," Zara countered. 5 months into their relationship, Zara discovered something that changed everything. She'd been feeling off for weeks, tired and nauseous, which she'd attributed to stress and overwork. But when the symptoms persisted, she visited the medical bay for a checkup. The human doctor who examined her looked stunned. "You're pregnant," she said simply. Zara's world stopped. "That's impossible. Vampires can't reproduce." "Vampires can't reproduce with other vampires," the doctor corrected. "But there are ancient records, myths really, of vampire-human pairings producing children. We thought they were just stories. Apparently not." Zara sat in shock, trying to process a child. She was carrying Valdrin's child, a hybrid of human and vampire that shouldn't be possible. The implications were staggering. "Does Lord Valdrin know?" the doctor asked gently. "Not yet, I just found out." Zara pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "What does this mean? What kind of child will this be? I honestly don't know. The old records are vague, contradictory. Some say hybrid children are fully human, others that they carry vampire traits. We'll have to monitor closely, take things as they come." Zara left the medical bay in a daze. She needed to tell Valdrin, but she had no idea how he'd react. They'd never discussed children, never considered it a possibility. Would he be happy, afraid, angry? She found him in his study, reviewing reports. He looked up when she entered, his expression immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" he asked, rising from his desk. "I need to tell you something," Zara said, "and I don't know how you're going to take it." Valdrin crossed to her, taking her hands. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Tell me." "I'm pregnant," Zara said. "With your child, which shouldn't be possible but apparently is." For a long moment, Valdrin simply stared at her, his ancient mind clearly racing through implications. Then his expression transformed into something like wonder. "A child," he said softly. "I never thought, in over 2 centuries, I never imagined." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully. This is extraordinary. Terrifying, but extraordinary. You're not angry, Zara asked, relief flooding through her. Angry? Why would I be angry? Valdrin pulled back to look at her. This is a gift I never expected to receive. The chance to be a father, to help create life rather than just taking it. How could I be anything but grateful? Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. I was so afraid you'd see it as a complication. It is a complication, Valdrin said honestly. A tremendous one. There will be political ramifications, security concerns, unknown medical issues. But it's also the most remarkable thing that's happened to me in centuries. He cupped her face gently. We'll figure it out. Whatever this child is, whatever they need, we'll provide it. Together. The pregnancy was indeed complicated. The hybrid nature of the child meant unpredictable development. Some weeks Zara felt perfectly normal, other weeks she was exhausted and sick. The court physician consulted every available text on vampire-human hybrids, of which there were few and all contradictory. Political reactions were mixed. Some vampires saw the pregnancy as proof that human-vampire integration could work on fundamental levels. Others viewed it with suspicion or outright hostility, calling the child an abomination. Valdrin dealt with the latter with cold efficiency, making it clear that any threat to Zara or the baby would be considered treason. Human reactions were similarly complex. Some saw hope in the pregnancy, a sign that the two species could truly coexist. Others feared what kind of creature the hybrid child would become. Through it all, Valdrin was steadfast. He attended every medical appointment, read every ancient text, prepared for every contingency. He was protective to the point of being overbearing until Zara sat him down and explained that she needed to maintain some autonomy even while pregnant. I'm not fragile, she told him firmly. I'm carrying your child, yes, but I'm still capable of doing my work and making my own decisions. I know, Valdrin said, looking chastened. I'm sorry. It's difficult, knowing you're vulnerable and being unable to eliminate all threats. Welcome to how the rest of us live all the time, Zara said wryly. Now let me finish this proposal, and we can discuss nursery arrangements later. 7 months into the pregnancy, complications arose. Zara began bleeding, the baby's heartbeat became irregular, and the physicians admitted they were in unknown territory. Valdrin was nearly frantic with worry, his usual control fraying at the edges. Do something, he demanded of the medical staff. Use vampire blood, use magic, use whatever resources exist. My lord, the senior physician said carefully, we're doing everything we can. But this is unprecedented. We don't know what will help and what might harm. Zara, exhausted and frightened, reached for Valdrin's hand. It's going to be okay, she said, trying to convince herself as much as him. You don't know that, Valdrin said, his voice raw with fear. I could lose you both and I would be powerless to stop it. You're not powerless. You're here with me. That matters. In the end, what saved them was a combination of human medical knowledge and vampire blood transfusions. The hybrid child seemed to need both human nutrients and vampire blood to stabilize. Once they figured that out, Zara's condition improved rapidly, and the baby's heartbeat steadied. Crisis averted, the physician announced with obvious relief. But you'll need to be monitored closely for the remainder of the pregnancy. Valdrin didn't leave Zara's side for 3 days, conducting all his business from her bedside, holding her hand even while reviewing reports and issuing orders. It was during one of these moments, watching him work while maintaining physical contact with her, that Zara fully understood the depth of his love. He was terrified. This ancient, powerful vampire king was genuinely afraid of losing her, and that fear had cracked open his usual controlled facade. He loved her enough to be vulnerable, to show weakness, to admit that he needed her in ways that defied his immortal nature. Valdrin, she said softly, interrupting his review of a security report. I love you. I need you to know that. Whatever happens, however this all turns out, I love you completely. He set aside the report, his blood-red eyes bright with emotion. I love you as well, more than I have words to express. You and this child are my reason for continuing to build something better rather than descending into the easy darkness of monstrosity. The baby was born 2 months later, after a difficult labor that required both human obstetrics and vampire healing to manage. Zara screamed and bled and pushed while Valdrin held her hand, offering his own blood when her strength flagged, whispering encouragement in multiple languages, including some so ancient she couldn't identify them. When the baby finally emerged, the room fell silent. The child was pale but not white like a full vampire. Her eyes, when they opened, were blue rather than red. She cried with strong lungs, undeniably alive and human-seeming, but with an otherworldly quality that marked her as something more. A girl, the physician said, placing the baby on Zara's chest. Congratulations. Zara stared down at her daughter, overwhelmed with love and exhaustion. The baby looked up at her with those startling blue eyes, and Zara felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known possible. "She's perfect," Valdrin breathed, his finger gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. When the infant gripped his finger, his expression transformed into pure wonder. "What should we name her?" "Alara," Zara said, the name coming to her instinctively. "It means light." "Alara Hastings," Valdrin said, testing it out. "Yes, that's perfect." Over the following weeks, they learned more about what Alara was. She seemed primarily human, requiring milk and sleep like any infant, but she was stronger than a normal baby, her grip surprising, her cries carrying unusual force. Most tellingly, she showed no fear of Valdrin or the other vampires, seeming to recognize them as family rather than threat. "She's a bridge," Valdrin said one night, holding Alara while Zara rested. "Between our species, between what was and what could be." "No pressure on her then," Zara said wryly. "She won't carry that burden alone," Valdrin said. "We'll raise her to be strong and kind and capable of making her own choices. She'll be her own person, not a symbol." True to his word, Valdrin was a devoted father despite his complete lack of experience with children. He learned to change diapers with the same precision he applied to governing. He paced the floor at night when Alara cried, singing to her in languages dead for centuries. He protected her fiercely while also giving her space to develop naturally. The court adjusted to the reality of the hybrid princess. Some vampires remained disapproving, but most came to accept and even cherish Alara. She became a symbol of the new order, proof that human and vampire could create something beautiful together. A year after Alara's birth, Zara stood in Valdrin's chambers, watching him read to their daughter from a centuries-old book. Alara, now walking and babbling, climbed all over him with the fearlessness of a child who had never known anything but love and safety. "I never imagined this," Zara said softly. "A year ago I was in chains in a slaver's cart, certain my life was over. Now I have a family, a purpose, a future." Valdrin looked up at her, Alara settling into his lap with a yawn. "I never imagined this either. I thought I would rule alone for centuries more, maintaining order but never having a true home. You changed everything." "We changed each other," Zara said, crossing to sit beside them. Alara immediately reached for her, wanting to be held by both parents at once. "We built something new from the ruins. And we'll keep building," Valdrin said. "For her, for us, for everyone trying to survive in this strange new world." Zara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, their daughter held between them. Outside the window, the city lights spread in all directions, a beacon of order in the chaos. The world was still broken, still dangerous, still struggling to find new equilibrium. But here in this moment they had peace. 2 years later, Zara addressed a gathering of human refugees in Sanctuary 7, now expanded to accommodate hundreds. She spoke about the work programs, the educational initiatives, the slow but steady rebuilding of infrastructure. She spoke with confidence born from experience, no longer the frightened graduate student but a leader in her own right. Valdrin watched from the back of the room, Alara on his shoulders, and felt something like contentment. His territories were stable. The slaving operations had been eliminated entirely. Human-vampire relations were improving slowly but measurably, and he had a family, something he'd never expected to have again. After the meeting, they walked through the sanctuary gardens, a project Zara had championed to provide fresh food and green space. Alara ran ahead, her pale hair catching the afternoon sunlight that Valdrin carefully avoided by staying in the shadows. "She's so much like you," Zara observed, watching their daughter. "Fearless and determined." "She has your kindness," Valdrin countered, "and your intelligence. The fearlessness is probably just childish ignorance of danger." Zara laughed. "Maybe. But I think she inherited the best parts of both of us." "Hopefully," Valdrin said. He caught Alara as she ran back to them, lifting her high and making her shriek with delight. "Though she certainly inherited my tendency to ignore reasonable warnings." "That's definitely from you," Zara agreed. They returned to the court as evening fell, the time when Valdrin could move freely without fear of sunlight. His vampires were gathering for the nightly briefing, but Valdrin took a moment to settle Alara with her nanny before joining them. In the private moment, he pulled Zara close. "I love you," he said, as he did every day. "Thank you for giving me this life. I love you too," Zara replied. "Thank you for shattering those iron bars." "Always," Valdrin promised. "I'll always break any chains that bind you." They kissed, brief but intense, before duty called them back to the work of building civilization from chaos. It wasn't a perfect life. There were still struggles, still dangers, still nights when Zara woke from nightmares about the slaver's cart and Valdrin held her until the fear passed. There were political crises and security threats and the constant challenge of maintaining peace between species who had every reason to hate each other. But it was their life, built from ruins and love and the choice to keep fighting for something better. And that was enough. Years passed and Alara grew. She was indeed a bridge between species, comfortable with both humans and vampires, showing signs of minor supernatural abilities while remaining fundamentally human. She was bright and curious, asking endless questions about the world that had existed before the veil fell, and the world her parents were building from its ashes. Valdrin expanded his territories carefully, bringing more regions under his protection, always with the goal of establishing systems that promoted coexistence rather than exploitation. Zara's education programs flourished, creating a generation of children who grew up learning about both human and vampire history, understanding both species as complex rather than simply good or evil. They faced challenges, of course. An assassination attempt when Alara was 5, thwarted by Valdrin's security but leaving them all shaken. A political crisis when neighboring vampire territories tried to undermine Valdrin's authority. A pandemic that affected humans more severely than vampires, requiring careful management of resources and fears. Through it all, they stood together, their love deepening with each shared challenge. Valdrin learned to be more human, to embrace emotion and vulnerability rather than hiding behind cold authority. Zara learned to navigate power, to wield influence without being consumed by it, to balance compassion with pragmatism. On their 10th anniversary, Zara stood in the throne room where she'd first truly met Valdrin, watching as he addressed the full court. He spoke about the progress they'd made, the systems they'd built, the future they were creating. His white hair gleamed under the lights, his blood-red eyes scanning the assembled vampires and humans with equal respect. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, genuine rather than simply dutiful. Valdrin had earned their loyalty through action and consistency, proving that a vampire could rule with both strength and honor. He descended from the throne and crossed directly to Zara, taking her hand in front of everyone. "None of this would have been possible without you," he said clearly, ensuring everyone heard. "You changed me, changed all of us, by refusing to accept that survival was the only option, by demanding that we build something worth living for, not just enduring in. I love you, Zara Finch, and I thank you for the past 10 years and look forward to however many more we're granted." Zara felt tears prick her eyes, moved by the public declaration. Valdrin rarely showed such open emotion in formal settings, and the gesture was all the more meaningful for its rarity. "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for shattering my chains and giving me freedom. Thank you for building a world where our daughter can grow up without fear. Thank you for choosing to be better than the easy path would have allowed." They kissed and the court applauded again, celebrating not just their rulers but the proof that love could transcend species and circumstance. That night, alone in their chambers with Alara asleep in the adjoining room, they made love with the familiarity of long partnership but also the continued passion of deep attraction. Afterward, lying tangled together in the ancient bed, Zara traced the line of Valdrin's jaw. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking on all this responsibility, binding yourself to a human who will age and die while you remain?" "Never," Valdrin said firmly. "You've given me more than I could have imagined. As for your mortality." He paused, his expression becoming complex. "There are ways if you wished it. Vampire blood, carefully administered, can extend human life significantly without full turning. You could live for centuries, age very slowly." Zara had known this, had researched it years ago. "And if I choose not to, then I'll love you for however long we have," Valdrin said simply. "And when you're gone, I'll carry the memory of you for the rest of my existence. I won't pretend it won't devastate me, but I'll survive it because you've taught me that love is worth the eventual pain of loss." "Ask me again in 20 years, Zara said. "When I'm older and our daughter is grown, maybe then I'll want to extend my time, but right now I'm content to be human, to age naturally, to experience life the way it was meant to be experienced, and that's what we'll do." Valdrin agreed. He kissed her forehead. "I'll support whatever you choose, always." They fell asleep like that, human and vampire, entwined in the darkness, their daughter safe in the next room, their city gradually healing beyond the windows. It wasn't the ending Zara had imagined when she'd been chained in that slaver's cart, weeping at dusk. It was better, richer, more complex and real than any fantasy could have provided. She'd been saved by a vampire king, yes. But more than that, she'd found her match, her partner, her home in the most unlikely of circumstances. And together, they'd built something worth fighting for, something worth living for, something worth loving for. The future remained uncertain, as it always would be. But they would face it together, bound not by chains but by choice, by love, by the shared commitment to keep building light from darkness. And that was the truest happy ending of all.